Okay, well, here we go. So welcome to our virtual conference tips, tricks, and Q&A. My name is Monica Rasmussen. I'm one of your Graduate Life Fellows for this academic year, and I'm also a second-year PhD student. So the reason I wanted to put this together is because I've been attending conferences for years, and they're a really good place to learn and network and just put yourself out there. And I wanted to do this because I feel like conferences are really intimidating, especially for students, but they're really exciting. And I wanted everyone to be prepared and comfortable going and essentially just encourage you to go and still be a part of virtual conferences. So don't be intimidated by the format. And I want this to be super casual, just whatever questions you have, feel free to ask. And we'll have a Q&A after this presentation, and you can ask a bunch of people, whatever you want. So, are you ready to meet some strangers on the internet? I know you are because you're here. So, virtual conferences are weird, but they do have some pros. So, I want to first present to you, what can be good about this environment. Basically, virtual means that you're online, which means that you have access to the entire world. It seems overwhelming, but this also means that you can get out of it whatever you want to put into it. So, going to a conference virtually just requires your attention, a computer or tablet, and internet access. And all of you have that because you're all here. A lot of organizations are offering reduced or free attendance for conferences this year, which is awesome because you can go to more conferences. And even if they're not changing their cost of the conference, a lot of them have really cheap student memberships anyway. So it's not nearly as expensive as it will be once you're out of school. Also keep in mind, if you do have trouble paying for conferences, the graduate, professional, and student government does give travel grants. So that's the GPSG, and you can find them on Niner Engage. And I know that the fall deadline has run out because I actually got some funding to go to a conference this semester, and it's basically just going to pay my entry fee. So they'll probably be doing that again in the spring. So check out GPSG on Niner Engage, and they can help you pay for your conference. Now, one thing that is nice about virtual conferences as opposed to in person is that you don't miss out on your current obligations. So I'm able, for example, to go to 2 conferences this semester, whereas normally I would go to maybe 1 a semester or 1 per year because I'm going to have to miss out on school while I'm gone. So by going to a virtual conference, I can essentially work around all of my personal obligations and classes and still attend when I'm available. Now, this doesn't seem like a pro, but it is. Zoom meetings and webinars are super, super awkward. And the reason that this is good is because it puts all of us on equal footing. Normally, you go to a conference and you're surrounded by people who all know each other, and they all are professionals who go every year, and they have their little cliques. And it's really easy to feel like an outsider, which makes it difficult to ask questions and engage with people and go to social events. But the good thing is that this is now weird for all of us equally. So take advantage of that and participate to the level that you can, because everyone is sort of in this new world now. And this might seem sort of counterintuitive, but I went to a conference in the spring and I found that it was easier to learn and follow up with people. And that was for a couple of reasons. One was that it's easy to take notes because you're on a computer. Another is if you're listening to a talk or something and people mention things that you have no idea about, you can actually Google it really quickly, figure out what they're talking about, and get back into the talk. So sometimes people will lose you like right in the beginning of a talk when they start using all this jargon that you don't know, and you can look it up. It really, really helps. There's also more time to follow up with people immediately because you have breaks between sessions and you're just on your computer. So normally you go from one session to another and you fill all that time with sort of mingling and walking around and figuring out where to go. And now you're on your computer, you can shoot off a quick email, and it allows you to really stay on top of things. So those are some of the pros, but obviously the cons are pretty big, and they're probably why you're here. So one important thing to remember is that Zoom fatigue is real, and everyone is busy. So this conference, this session is going to be moderated later by Dr. Aura Young, and she said to me recently that she suggested doing a happy hour at the end of the day to network, and then she didn't go because she was sick of being on Zoom all day. And I think this is kind of funny because it's happened to everybody that you have all these bright, wonderful ideas on Monday morning, and by Thursday afternoon, you're like, don't talk to me, turning off my video, I need to just go take a bath. That's completely okay. Figure out how much time you can give. You can go to a conference and not be at a conference all day, every day. It's completely reasonable. So one thing that you could do is figure out how much time you were planning to spend at this conference anyway. For example, say I want to go to a conference that I normally spend 3 full days attending. Let's call that 20 hours of work. So you can say, I'm going to go to this conference, which is now spread out over an entire week, and I'm going to spend 20 hours at that conference. And then you can chunk that up so that it actually makes sense with who you are, how you work, and what your schedule looks like. Another good thing is that you actually know yourself better than you used to on the computer. So it's not great that we've all been on the computer for months, but it is good because you can be honest about what you can handle. And there's a couple of ways to think about this. One of them is professionally and sort of academically, and another is personally. Maybe you can sit and pay attention for an hour, and then your mind starts to wander, and you're not listening and you're not learning anymore. So that means that you should give yourself 1 hour of sessions and then a break. On a personal level, maybe you can be social for 20 minutes, but then it's just so uncomfortable and feels so unnatural that you start to lose it, and it's really nerve-wracking and stressful. That's okay. Figure out what works for you and keep that in mind and plan around it. Now, communication barriers are something that are not specific to virtual conferences. They're kind of everywhere, but specifically at conferences, this is a real problem for people because a lot of people think public speaking is terrifying and awful. And it's even harder for international students because there's that added level of translating things in your mind, and you can feel very uncomfortable in front of people. In this sense, international student can mean a student that is from another country that's living in the US and attending conferences here, or someone who lives in the US who wants to go to a conference in another country. Because remember, it's all virtual. You can go anywhere. One thing to remember is to focus on communicating simply and clearly. So focus on that. Focus on communicating your point accurately. You can speak much more slowly than you normally would and be very concise. It'll be a lot easier for people to understand you. And this is just good advice for communication in general. Make a script. Normally, I would say making a script is just going to give you something to memorize and it will be really unnatural, but you're sitting on a computer. If you're more comfortable reading a script, you can make a script and just read it while you're presenting. It's not bad. It's basically replacing your note cards. Another thing you can do in addition to having a script is you can have notes for yourself on things that you commonly forget or things that you say incorrectly. So for example, if there's units that you always say wrong or explanations of particular phenomena that you always struggle to get around, write it down and you'll have that ready for you right there. Your computer is open, so you can take advantage of having it. Now, subtitles are something that we should be adding to all of our talks and using all the time because they're a really good step towards inclusion. And you need to specifically do this if you know you will not be showing your face on screen. You can also use subtitles to just clearly communicate what you're saying. It helps a lot if you're worried about people understanding you, or if you tend to get nervous and your voice changes, like maybe you get sort of a waver in your voice or your voice gets really high. If you use subtitles, it'll make it easier if people's connections aren't good or if they don't quite understand you. And of course, the best advice you can give anyone at a presentation is just to relax. Remember, it's weird for everybody, so just calm down, it's okay. I like that I'm at home because I can wear pajama bottoms, I can make myself my favorite drink, I can be in a very comfortable space, and that helps me to feel, comfortable. I'm at home. Before you get on a Zoom call or before you give a presentation, just sit quietly and breathe a little bit, calm your nerves down, because there's nothing to be scared of. Everyone's just sitting at home, everyone's struggling to get through this, and you're going to do a great job. So, before you go to a conference, you have to have a game plan. I used to have a friend that was, she was a writer, and she would just do freelance writing jobs. And she went to like 8 conferences a year. And one time I asked her, how do you actually follow up with everybody that you meet at these conferences? And she was like, oh, I'm like 6 conferences behind. So I think her game plan was to go and have fun at the conference, but it wasn't a very good use of her time. So think about why you're going. Are you looking to find a mentor? Are you just going to learn, which is important and completely valid? Are you looking for a job? Whatever it is, you can think about sessions that way and how you're going to use your time given your goal. So if you want to find a mentor, read up on the sessions and choose sessions where you'll be interacting with people that you want to meet. If you're just there to learn, maybe talk to your advisor and they can direct you towards specific sessions that will help you. And if you're looking for a job, of course, you want to prioritize going to things where you can show off what you know. So go to sessions where you can engage with people, you can show off your expertise, and the people that you're meeting will recognize what you know and see that that is valuable. And of course, for any of these things, go to as many social events as you can because conferences are primarily about networking. If you're presenting, a good thing to keep in mind is that your equipment and your technology and your lighting and your background, everything needs to be thought about. And it seems like a lot, but it's not really that bad. I know some people say, I have an old laptop, it's going to be recorded badly, there's nothing I can do. But the library at UNCC will rent out equipment for you. So you can actually rent microphones and cameras, and they can help you with technology and get you all set up. So if you need to do that, it's on the library website. They have a section on technology and equipment, and you can rent, GoPros. Honestly, you can rent things like video game systems too, but that's not for conferences. It's just kind of fun. But check it out. It's really nice to be able to use like a professional microphone, a professional camera, especially if you're doing a longer talk. Deadlines and formatting, everyone's favorite topic. Now, for virtual conferences, the big reason that you have to think about this is because a lot of your deadlines have changed and the formats are obviously different. Now, this doesn't just mean the format of the conference itself, but potentially the format of what you've done before. So to give you an example, I'm presenting a poster at a conference at the end of October. And normally that would mean that I make a poster, I print it out, and I bring it with me at the end of October. But in fact, I had to do it this week, and it had to be recorded. And I went to present my recording and put it all onto the website. I was all excited that I was done with it, and I realized that I hadn't read all the fine print, and my poster was the wrong size. So I finished my poster, and then I had to completely reformat it and re-record it. So don't do what I did. Read all the paperwork, give yourself time to figure out your formatting, and make sure you look at your deadlines once you decide you're going to go. Now, this is sort of related to the formatting. Different conferences are using different platforms. And honestly, I had not considered this at all, but at a recent orientation Q&A, one of the students said she has gone to 3 virtual conferences, and they were all completely different in how they worked. A lot of people are using sort of proprietary systems that their organization is setting up. So what I'm planning on doing in the conferences that I'm going to be going to is that I'm going to spend about 20 minutes on the first day and just open up the platform and figure out how it works. I don't want the technology to get in the way of me interacting with people and learning and experiencing everything that I'm taking the time to do. So I'm going to just play around with it, figure out how to use the chat box, figure out where all the organization is, and then once I actually get down to going to a session, it won't get in the way that I don't understand how it works. So if you have a plan of why you're going to this conference, you have to use that to make your priorities and then make a schedule. And scheduling has been such a bear for everybody that I know you probably have your own way to do it. I like to use Google Calendar. You can also just write it down on a piece of paper. It doesn't matter. But remember that we've talked about how many hours you're going to dedicate to things and why you're going. So spread those hours out on high priority events. This can help you make sure that you don't miss out on meeting people, you don't double book yourself, make sure that you're not super stressed about missing out on classwork. You need to balance all of your other priorities as well. But by making yourself a schedule, it'll take all that stress away and you can just stick to it and make sure that you get to go to social events and important places where you can meet the people that you want to meet. And this, of course, is the most difficult thing because conferences are more about your connections that you make than they are about, the format of your poster. It's so much about getting advice from people, interacting with people, asking them questions, them asking you questions, coming up with ideas, finding people to work with. It's a really, really interesting setting. And a lot of that actually happens outside of the conference anyway. It normally happens over lunch or sometimes in the elevator in the nearby hotel. You'll meet people all over the place during a conference. So that's not going to happen during Zoom. But what you can do is you can sort of think outside the box. So say I was planning to have lunch and I was going to try and find this one particular person and see if they would have lunch with me. Contact them, see if they're free over the lunch break and say, I'm going to make myself a sandwich. Can I talk to you for 20 minutes? It'll be, kind of weird, but this is weird for everybody. Just try it out. Another thing you could plan to do is outside the conference, you can meet up with people who you know are going. So that could be people that are maybe on your research team or your advisor and all the people that they know. Just different groups of people. Set up some little meetups and they can be super casual. Maybe you're going to be giving a presentation during a session and you invite all the other people in your session afterwards to crack open a beer and relax, chat with each other. It'll just be a nice way to get people loosened up and talking on a more normal way. And that's when a lot of your real networking happens. Now, I keep mentioning networking, and networking on its own is extremely awkward. It's always weird. And I immediately thought of this particular GIF with this little boy laughing and crying at the same time when I think about networking, because it's just nerve-wracking. It took me a few months of working in a professional environment before I could even start acting like myself. I think that a lot of people feel like when they're networking, they have to put on their professional face and their big adult clothes and talk about adult things like the stock market or something. And you absolutely don't. You can completely loosen up and be yourself, and you are an adult and you are at this conference just like everybody else. And the vision of what an adult looks like to you is not nearly as interesting as you are. So just be yourself. Dress like yourself. Don't be overly formal in how you act or talk unless that's what makes you comfortable. The whole point of networking is for me to get to know you and you to get to know me as a real person. So make it personal. It's completely fine to start out a conversation by addressing how weird things are. It's actually a really good icebreaker to point out how uncomfortable it is to try and do this virtually. Don't be afraid to ask silly personal questions, pay attention to people, and, look around at what you're seeing. One of my favorite things in an in-person conference to get to know people and sort of use as an icebreaker is to just compliment something random. And it almost always makes me look like a crazy person, but it does always get them to talk to me. So for example, if I saw someone walking by and they had a bag full of goodies, from other booths, I would say, is there any cool swag that I need? What do you got there? Which is a really, really weird thing to say to someone, but it does get them to come over and show you. And then you could say, okay, sorry, I was just trying to get to know people at the conference. Can I give you my little elevator pitch about what I'm doing? So it might be strange, but you can do this over Zoom. You can say, oh, I really like that painting behind you. Did you do that? Where'd you get that? Talk about something super casual and sort of transition that into what you're actually trying to get out of this conversation. So I mentioned your elevator pitch. You have to have your elevator pitch ready. And keep in mind that you're at a conference that has a specific topic, so try and have an elevator pitch with that in mind. If you're at a conference where everyone's going to know what you're doing, then you can use jargon and be very specific, but either way, you need to keep it really, really short. You want to just very briefly introduce who you are, why you're there, and then transition back to asking them about themselves. If you don't know how to do an elevator pitch and you've never done it before, the CGL and the University Career Center can help you work through this. And you can always send me an email and I'll work it out with you. I like helping people with these kind of things. It's fun for me to know that people are getting better at just being themselves in front of other people. And of course, the key to any networking event is following up and actually staying in contact with people. It doesn't matter if you go and meet 30 people if you never talk to them again. Personally, I like to follow up with people on LinkedIn because then they have a picture of me and they can remember the interaction, and I send them a quick personalized piece of information. One thing that's good about virtual networking versus networking in person is that you can actually take notes about people and about things that you want to talk to them about later while you're talking to them. So just quickly write down, potential employer and circle it. And then later you can find them on LinkedIn or email them or anything like that and keep that conversation going. So if you're familiar with Princess Bride, I found this on the internet and I thought it was absolutely beautiful. The most famous line in the movie probably is, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." And I love using this to think about networking because it's a perfect way to keep this in your head. And it's such a well-known line that you'll easily remember it. So he starts with a polite greeting, "Hello." His name, "My name is Inigo Montoya." A relevant personal link, "You killed my father." Hopefully you guys won't have that one. And managing expectations, "Prepare to die." So how could I translate this to what I would say to somebody? I could say, "Hi, I'm Monica. It was really great to meet you at my session. I'm glad you came. You mentioned that you wanted feedback on your elevator pitch. Do you have 20 minutes on Tuesday to talk about it?" So I was brief, direct. I set up a specific action plan of how we're going to keep talking to each other. And again, nothing too formal. It's just a couple people trying to keep their conversation going. So with that, I will hand over to our moderator. I hope that got some questions going in your head. I really just want to keep you guys excited about the idea of going to conferences, and now we can answer some questions for you from a variety of different people. So I'll turn off sharing my screen so we can all see each other a little bit bigger.
Hi, everybody. I am Aura Young, Assistant Director of the Center for Graduate Life. I have, in my past life, been to many academic conferences, and now I go to professional conferences. Go get some water. A child here. So let me go around and introduce our panelists, or I guess actually, why don't you guys introduce yourselves? I'm going to start with Dr. Epps.
I'm Missy Epps. I'm a professor in the Department of Geography and Earth Sciences here at UNC Charlotte. And I'm also this year chair of my professional division of the Geological Society of America. So I'm in charge of putting on one of these virtual conferences this year, at least on the committee that is putting it on. So that's probably all you need to know. I'm a geologist, so I attend conferences in STEM fields, large things like AGU, down to really small specialty conferences.
Thanks. And Dr. Pitts, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Pitts. I'm an assistant professor of philosophy, pronouns they, them, theirs. I'm in the humanities, so I've been going to a lot of philosophy conferences since grad school. So it's pretty common for us to go to conferences as a grad student. And virtual conferences are new to me as well. They're awkward for me as well. So I just echo everything Monica shared. And then, but I've also tried to figure out how to really take advantage of them as much as I can and really try to connect as much as I can, even during these difficult times. So yeah, I look forward to chatting with folks.
Awesome. And we also have Roche Ashrafi. Am I putting the accent on the right syllable of your last name?
That's great.
Do you want to introduce yourself for us?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Rosh Ashrafi, and I'm in my fourth year in infrastructures and environmental systems, somehow interdisciplinary between architecture and civil engineering, what I'm doing now. And I had the chance to attend 2 conferences here at the US for now. And it was a great experience for me, intimidating at the same time. And I will be happy to share my experience with other international students. As Monica was explaining, I think that it has some level of weirdness for international students as well, as it is weird virtual for you all. For us, it was weird at first. So yeah, thank you.
Well, great. I was going to say, if you guys who are attending here, if you want to turn on your cameras, that's totally cool. And then we can all see each other. But you don't have to, obviously. And of course, please chat in your questions in the chat box, whatever questions you may have about attending conferences. So let me see. Well, I guess you guys sort of touched a little bit on the sort of conference experiences you've had. I guess, does anybody want to elaborate? Do you have any particularly insightful, interesting things that have happened with conferences lately?
Well, I'd like to jump in and maybe just echo and emphasize something that I heard Monica mention. I think one of the biggest benefits of attending conferences then and now, and I think I think it was captured in the phrase learning, but I think for us in the humanities, it's often an opportunity to have a captive audience who's listening to your research. And I think that is immensely valuable because I consider our field and the other interdisciplinary field. So I go to Latin American Studies conferences, I go to Women's and Gender Studies conferences, and so on. And so I think one of the biggest benefits is having an audience who's listening to your work and focusing and attending to the thing that you may have spent a considerable amount of time developing. And so I think that aspect is learning, but it's also a dialogue, and it's also you trying things out and experimenting. And I think for me, I used to feel like I had to go to a conference and like hold a shield up and defend the thing that I was bringing. Like I had to fight back everyone else who was going to come attack my argument or whatnot. Which is, even the language is there, right? You're gonna defend an argument. You have, critique is going to hurt or whatever, all those things. But I think now I see conferences as more of an opportunity to dialogue and to communicate and to try things out, which is still scary. It's still hard. But I think it's less, I think as the longer you do it, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with thinking through ideas collectively with other people. And I think that's actually a big benefit for me of conferences in general, and then also listening and participating in virtual conferences as well.
Great. Let me see. Actually, there's already a question here. Oh, Dylan, so you're asking, I'm sorry. Basically, I live in a nursery. This apartment complex is full of like 3 and 4 year olds, so you might hear some of that back here. So Dylan says, do you all have any tips for using the chat feature at conferences? Something you don't want to look like you're not paying attention, but that may be the best place to communicate with people in a meeting. What do you think about that?
I'm happy to answer that. So everyone's, for the most part, looking at themselves, Dylan, so no one's gonna, and everyone, we all have things going on in our homes. I mean, that's been the interesting part of being on Zooms that people have grown accustomed to. So I think, like Monica was saying, the chat feature is a great equalizer because then people aren't, they feel like their voice is just as equal as everyone else's. So I think people expect you to use that feature, and it's a really strong tool.
Yeah, I'd also like to mention that some of the events that I've been attending, because there's lots of weekly events that have been going on, they'll have a chat feature that also has upvoting. So if you ask a question, people can sort of thumbs up it, and then the most relevant question actually gets asked to the presenter at the end. And I always ask questions. I just have a rule of thumb that if I'm seeing a presentation, have a question ready, because if you've ever given a talk and there's no questions, it's like the worst thing that can happen to you. It feels awful. So I always have one ready, and I've asked one at every single thing I've gone to. And a couple of times I've gotten like one of the top 2 or 3 questions. And it's really rewarding to feel like I showed up as just a nobody and I actually understood it and interacted with people and contributed something. So I would encourage you to always ask questions.
Wow, that's so cool. What platform allows you to do that?
It might actually be WebEx. I'm not sure. It's all been geology talks essentially, but it's the chats will come in all throughout a presentation, and then they sort of rank themselves. So,
oh wow,
yeah, it works well.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was gonna follow up on the Q&A point, that I think that's actually, again, another, just to echo that concern, that if you show up to a space with a bunch of senior folks who are in the field and they're not going to know about your research or where you're at even in your studies. So to ask a really pointed and careful question, or a very open question that really kind of expands a debate, that is an excellent way to get people like remembering who you are, thinking about, maybe curious about your research because it's framed in a way that's now kind of opening up a dialogue. So I think having, putting yourself out there even, which again can seem scary by asking a question, is often a really excellent way to get the networking started, and again, to propel that research dialogue, which I think is really important.
Yeah, and I think that if you're going to put a question in the chat box, like for me, I'm very shy actually, and I hate to ask questions and talk at conferences and stuff. But if you can put your question in the chat box and you can think about it and not sound like you're just jibber jabbering, and so that could be helpful. Okay, so Roche says, how are the time scheduling of virtual conferences in comparison to in-person ones? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I should raise my hand.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, so I can speak to that for the two main conferences in geosciences, for example. They've expanded the length of time so that there's less overlap and that the sessions are spread out through the entire day. For the AGU, which is a 20,000 person multidisciplinary conference, they start at 5 a.m. Pacific time and go till midnight Pacific time. And so because it's a global conference, right? Like Monica was saying. So things are spread out. And then that AGU conference is normally 5 days, and now it's 17 days. So it's really it's changed significantly. So you really do, if you're used to something already, you want to check way ahead of time and think about the timing of that.
That is crazy, 17 days. I was going to say that I helped organize a conference this past year. I'm on the board of directors of the Electronic Thesis and Dissertation Association, which is super exciting. But instead of doing a 3-day conference, we did like a 1-day town hall. We actually condensed it, and all the presentations were just 40 minutes, and we just had 5 minutes between them. And I think even the keynote speech was shorter, and it was free. So it's kind of the opposite situation.
Well, in fact, even though the conference itself is longer, actually across all of them that I'm involved in, the actual presentation time, that just want time, is decreased significantly. And the discussion time has increased a lot. And so I'm really curious, actually. I suspect that that's going to be an aspect of these virtual conferences that we want to transfer into in-person conferences. So just like Andrea was saying about having the potential to discuss your own research and get feedback on your research, there's going to be a lot more room for that in these virtual conferences, I think, than in a big room where you maybe have time for one question and then it's over. So I think actually, yeah, that aspect of it could be really good.
Andrea?
Yeah, and I know some of we host an event through our department here at UNC Charlotte called the Southeast Roundtable on Philosophy of the Americas. And this year we've transitioned to a workshop model, which is just to pick up on Missy's point about like what are the kinds of alternatives, where it used to be, everybody came in and did the standard presentation of, presenting your work and then Q&A kind of roundtable style. Now it's that the paper's distributed in advance. We have the 1-hour meeting, and that's like going to be spread out over several months. So it's no longer one event, but now a workshop series that is also, again, to have an audience that's willing to read and engage your work is, I think, a tremendous opportunity. So I've been trying to get folks, which again, I know it's scary, but to try to send out their work, which is hard, have somebody read it in advance. But then that's also an accessibility issue because, sometimes even with verbal presentations, the ability for an audience to follow a line of reasoning and to follow the evidence carefully is really difficult. So having the text in front of them, having the citations and references in front of them, being able to search things in real time, all of that is immensely valuable. And so I think it has the potential to really, transform some of how we do research collectively, which I like as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. That I really like that a lot. Okay, let me see here. So another time question, I guess, is, well, Monica, you mentioned this earlier. How much time is reasonable to dedicate to a conference? Like how much? You're obviously not going to spend 17 solid days in a conference. What do you guys? What's been your experience? Dr. X?
I think, I mean, that's a really personal question. So I think it goes back to Monica's initial point of know thyself, right? So I, for one, when I go to these conferences, I show up the day before and am like the very last person to leave the last day around the beer stand in geology. So, and that's what I enjoy. So that's 5 full days. And literally towards the end of my career, I don't even leave the conference center half the time. So I'm very focused on taking advantage of that group. But I didn't start out that way, right? So I started out maybe going, a day or a couple of days or a couple hours a day, and then I would go off and go whatever town I was in or something like that. So, I think it's a cost benefit analysis. If you're not spending a ton of money on a virtual conference, then you should do whatever is comfortable, and it's all bonus. I would say.
Yeah, that's a good point. Of course, that's one of the cons of not being able to go in person, is not being able to explore a new place. Monica?
I would like to add to that in terms of determining how much time to give to a conference, it's important to set your goal as like a maximum limit as well. So I said, say we're going to go for 20 hours. That's not like I have to get to my 20 hours. It's that if I've been at this conference for 20 hours, I need to stop, because it's so easy for all of us to get burnt out. Like, it's so easy to say, well, I could, before we started this, Dr. Pitts was saying that they would listen to, keynote speeches while making dinner. It's so easy to just stretch ourselves really, really thin. And personally, I tend to just keep doing something until it's perfect. And I'll say, this is a 2-hour task, and then I'm done with it. So, know yourself and set sort of minimum limits of what you want to match, but also maximum limits so that you don't completely lose your mind and lose track of all of your other obligations.
Unless you want to.
And just as far as like, well-being and kind of all around mental health, like I think back to something that Missy just mentioned, that like one of the benefits for me was that having pursued a graduate degree was that I got to travel. Like I had never traveled. My family is Central American, but we never traveled outside of the country until I was in graduate school. We didn't have the money, we didn't have the resources. I didn't have know-how and all those things. And so I think that was a huge benefit. And so what I realized is that I had to kind of like balance my intellectual and professional goals, which were to network and develop my research, but then also to have the opportunity to do something amazing and travel across the world and to connect with people in places that I had never planned to or had never dreamed of going. And so I think that's a huge thing that I think if you want to think about the long-term career as one that's going to give you maybe resources and experiences that you might not have had otherwise, I think that is a huge perk of doing this kind of research. And that, I think at some point there's this like assessment of saying, well, look, I really need to attend. I know, for example, being committed to 5 sessions where you're moderating and then you're chairing and then you're presenting here and then like we'll get involved in institutions like that. But there's also this kind of personal side of it, that there's an enrichment and then an experiential and a growth piece of it that also I think is really valuable to really think about. And for me, if I didn't take opportunities to step away from the conference, then I don't think, I think I would have missed out on a lot. So I think there's also that piece of it, is that it's okay to step out of a few sessions. It's okay to take time for yourself and really care about what it is that you want to get from this case, travel, but virtually same principle, the know thyself. It's okay to go make your dinner. I should turn off the earpiece and go make my dinner and enjoy time with my friends and my family. Like that's an important piece of this too.
Yeah, totally. It's so easy to overextend yourself virtually. Let me see. Okay, so I got a question here. What are the chances of having a one-on-one session with a professional on a virtual platform? Is that even kosher to ask for that? I don't know the answer to that question.
I couldn't hear the question.
Sorry, what are the chances of having a one-on-one session with a professional in a virtual platform? Can we ask for that? Is that done?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes this year, but you know, I know, like Monica was saying, these different meeting platforms, many of them have lounges where people are just in there with the expectation that someone will come knocking on their virtual door. So I think in that case, definitely. And it never hurts to just shoot an email to somebody and say, I saw you at the conference. I saw you speak. Would you like to Zoom? Just like what Monica was suggesting. If I got something like that, you know, I wouldn't take offense at it at all. If I was too busy, I would just ignore it, and then no harm is done, you know. So, or respond back, sorry, I can't do it, you know. So, if it's the type of person you would want to talk to, they will respond to you one way or the other. So there's no worry about trying.
Hey, Monica.
Yeah, I would like to add to that, and this is something that I used to do in person. If I knew that there were going to be specific people at an event that I was going to that I wanted to interact with, or I wanted them to know who I was, especially when I was working and I wanted to put my name out to specific groups of people so they would remember me, I would research who was going to be there and then like read their most referenced paper or their first paper. Just read their paper, know the abstract, and then say, I read your paper. You know, one specific instance, I did this with a guy who just explained a concept really well in his paper. And I saw him in a building walking by, and I walked up to him and I was like, I know this is weird, but I read your paper and you explained this particular thing in such a good way. Thank you so much. And I saw him like 2 years later and he knew who I was. Because flattery will get you so far. And walking up and being that super weird person that's like, I know you, I read your paper that you wrote 25 years ago. They're like, I will never forget this experience. Everybody loves that. Like, everybody loves a compliment. Everyone loves having their stuff read. So if you know who's going, you can do that. And then you can show up and be like the overachiever that everybody remembers. It's a lot of work, but if that's what you're trying to get out of the conference, then you can do it.
Yeah.
Almost every professional contact I've ever made is made that way. Just knowing someone's name from their papers, just walking up to them and saying and inserting myself into their world. And so it does require a little bit, you know, of boldness. And Monica and I both have that personality, and not everyone does. And I'm not, you know, I think for a virtual conference is a little bit more of an equalizer. You don't have to have the physical presence to like walk up to somebody. You can just send a chat if there's an option to do a chat to a specific person, or just send an email and everyone's in that space where there's an expectation. So yeah, you will always, nothing bad will happen. Nothing, you know, and something great could happen.
Funny anecdote. I presented at a conference last year and somebody came up to me during the happy hour and was complimenting me on my fantastic presentation. And then after listening to her talk for a minute, I was like, wait a minute, were you even at my presentation? And it turned out she had me confused with the keynote speaker. So that was kind of deflating. But Roche, did you have your hand up a second ago?
Yeah, Aura. So I wanted to talk about the same experience that I had in the conference. It wasn't a virtual conference. It was like the previous normal conferences, and it was my first conference attendance as an international student. So the points that you are saying about being shy totally makes sense to me. I have 2 conference attendance experiences here in the US, which are so different for me. Like, those are different in terms of, at the first one, I was in my first year and I was kind of shy and I didn't have that much experience. However, I was there with 2 of my office mates that they were both the students of my advisor. So after attending the conference and getting back to Charlotte, we had to have a group meeting and everyone had to talk about their experience and who they network and who they did talk to. And they were in their second year and they were more professional than me. And I didn't want to be the lazy one in the eye of my advisor. So I had no choice other than getting out of my comfort zone and just talk to people. I didn't have any idea about my research, what my research path is going to be. And I haven't started my research at all. But what I did was networking with other students that they were there. So I searched for their presentations and studied their presentations and identified the one who are relevant to what I'm doing, and I identified them and sit at their table at the lunchtime and just started a friendly chat. And I've just get out of my comfort zone and just started a friendly conversation. It was a great experience. Like I wasn't shy anymore because I had no other choice. It was very helpful. But the fun fact here, which I think is in my culture, it is somehow different, is that here in the conferences at the US is that if a group of people or even two people are talking and having a conversation, it's totally normal for you to stand by them as a third person and listen to what what they're talking about. It was so awkward for me. Like, can I do it? Is it okay? In my culture, it wasn't like that. And now here, I found out that it's totally okay. People are here to network and talk. So two people were talking about something that I was interested. I would just go there and listen to them more, and then engage myself in their in their conversation, what they're talking about. It was awesome. Like it was so awesome. And yeah, people here are to talk, and they were eager to learn about what I was doing. It was so flattering. In my second experience, however, which was in my second year, so I was a presenter there, and I had the chance of presenting, and I was somehow stressed with what I want to present and how I'm going to present, but the chances were good for people to know me better because I had a chance of like presenting myself to almost everyone. And especially if you do a good job with presenting presenting and get compliments on that, you get more confidence to continue networking. On that second conference, I was so confident that talked to three most influential people in my field, and I even asked two of them to if they're willing to be an external member of my committee, dissertation committee, and they accepted. Like they told me that if I will check my schedule and you shoot me an email and let's see. And it was so unexpected. So it was amazing. Like, I think the golden point here is that you just not to be shy. Don't be shy and get out of your comfort zone. And even for international students, it's good that there are lots of other international students at these conferences. So although we need to be better in our fluency, we need to try to get better and better, but it doesn't have to make us behind, like let us behind and don't let us talk. Yeah. So that was the experience that I had.
Well, thanks, Roche. I was thinking sort of on that note, like in the past when I've gone to conferences, I've made a personal goal to speak to a certain number of people that I didn't know, which, you know, I just really have to force myself to do that. So, I mean, yeah, it's hard to tell yourself, like, don't be shy. So if you like form a concrete goal, then that can be helpful.
Or get a conference buddy.
Yes.
Yeah. Challenge each other.
Yeah. Dr. Pitts, were you going to say something?
Yeah, and that works too in virtual formats. That if you have like a sidebar chat going and it's you supporting each other, doing like saying like, hey, that's a great point, or did you hear this thing? Like that's another way, which you can't do in real-time auditory settings other than like texting and those kinds of things. But I mean, like it is nice to have that kind of, you know, sidebar conversation where you can say, hey, do you think this is a good question? And the person's like, like, yeah, ask it. Like that's always a really good way of, finding folks who will support you that way. And I would also say that some of the best professional relationships and like deep friendships that I've formed has started by going to someone, following up and saying, that was a fantastic question. And I think that's also the point of flattery. But what it also says is that like, I like the way that you're thinking about these questions, and that like, I want to hear more and dialogue more with you about like where this question could take us. And like, I think that's an opening, right? It's not like, oh, you did this thing, which is great too. Believe me, I know I love talking about my own research. Most people do to some degree, or at least like when someone's informed and wants to come talk about it. Because of course I've geeked out on it for years. So it's a a niche interest that I want to delve into. But when it's a question, I think it's also really wonderful, because then it's someone saying like, yeah, how do we like, I really like that you were bringing out this element of it, and then you kind of both get to problem solve together. And like I said, I mean, I can say right now that when I started at UNC Charlotte as a faculty member, I asked of one of my deep friends now. I said, she asked a fantastic question, and I loved the way she phrased it because it hit on things that we were both thinking about, and it just can start really fruitful dialogues for the future.
I really like that idea of, if you've got a buddy and they ask a question in the chat box, you can be like, oh, that's great. What a great point. What a great question.
Yeah, I like sort of building on what Dr. Pitts was saying, that if you see someone ask a question that you find very interesting, or if you're like, wow, I want to think that way, I need to add that into my research, then that's a really good opportunity to contact that person in the chat or something and say, are you free right after this session, and set up a Zoom and actually engage with them, because everything is a little bit less personal while the Q&A is going on. But if you can say, hey, I feel like we could really learn from each other, or that sounds super fun, are you free? And be very specific and say, I want to talk to you in 2 hours. Are you available? And just get the ball rolling.
Yeah, great ideas. Maybe we have time for like one more question real quick, because I think a couple of us have meetings right at 4. But let me see. One of these questions here is, how do you find out about conferences, and are you doing anything different to find new ones abroad in particular that you wouldn't normally be able to attend? What are you guys doing? Anyone? Dr.
So, to find them, the best way to find conferences that are going to be relevant to your particular field, as you guys are all graduate students, is to talk to your advisor. That's probably going to be the most direct connection to something that's relevant to what your interests are. Or somebody else whose classes the type of classes you've attended, that you really are more interested in that subject, that professor, they'll key you into those. Yes, and for European conferences, I'm definitely looking now towards a European conference in the spring that I might not have attended otherwise. So it does open the door to that.
Roche?
Yeah, so the point that I want to mention is not about academic conferences, but industrial conferences. You may know about the iCorps Venture Prize program that we have at the university. They have 6 weeks workshops that the program is for basically motivating people to take their research ideas to the industry, and they have funding for us if we go to this 6 workshop sessions, that it's basically 6 weeks. And if we start a workshop there, we will get funding up to 5,000 to get into industrial conferences, because they want us to interview people about our ideas, about our research idea. They are not covering academic conferences, but when you're joining industrial conferences, you will get a lot of opportunity of interviewing industrial people about your idea. They would love it. So you join a conference and you'll do like 10 interviews at just one conference, and they will cover the expenses for you. just by joining the program, up to 5,000. That's great.
Gosh, thanks, Rose, for mentioning that. That's wonderful. So let me see. It's 3:58. So I think that, especially since I have to present something, I'm gonna go. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And I think if you need any links or any more information about anything that we've talked about, feel free to email me or Monica or any of us. Right? I mean, if you want to connect. So thanks so much for coming. And one more thing. Let me just tell you real quick. So tomorrow we've got our first STEM communications workshop at 4:00. And on Friday, we've got at 11 a.m. the second in the Accelerate to Industry series. So if you want some great, communication improving advice or job search advice, you should definitely register for one of those. And you can find them on our gradlife.uncc.edu/calendar page. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, panelists.
Thank you.
See you later.
Thank you, Aura.
Thanks, everyone.